Our next speaker is one of few Canadians who is a finalist to be a passenger on a one-way trip to Mars. Over 2,000 people applied in the second round. There are about 710. And our next speaker is one of them. Come and tell us why.
That's me. I'm not running this show.
The stand, and I need my clicker. Thank you so much. Can we bring the stand out really quickly? That'd be awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Listen, Moses, what a thrill this is for me. Back in the 1980s when I was a student at Ryerson, all of my classmates in the radio and television arts department had so much respect for everything you did to change the face of broadcasting at City TV and Much Music. You are a pioneer, and the pioneering spirit is what the Mars One mission is all about. Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much. Listen, good evening, everybody. I'd like to start things off with a question, and it's a big one. If someone gave you a one-way ticket to Mars, would you take it? Would you be willing to leave everything you've come to know and love, your friends, your family, your job, for the chance to colonize another planet? No guarantees that it would all work out, just the chance to be a pioneer. Simple question. As it turns out, not so simple an answer for some people, but it is the question that I faced about a year ago when I found out that Dutch entrepreneur Bas Lansdorp had started something called the Mars One mission, and he was offering anyone in the world the chance to become an astronaut on board the first spacecraft to ever take humankind to the Red Planet. And he was doing it with private money. Now, when I found out that Dr. Andy Aldrin was coming to Idea City, I got a little nervous. I mean, he and his dad are space royalty. Buzz Aldrin is obviously pursuing his own dream of taking mankind to Mars. I'm sure he has his own view on this project. All I can do is share mine with you. And by the time this is all over, I'm hoping that I will be your favorite Martian. So after a lot of serious thought, my answer to the question, would I take a one-way trip to Mars, was yes, which shouldn't come as a big surprise because I'm a journalist, and journalists love to experience the world. They love to tell other people what they've seen and why it's important. You may be surprised, though, to hear that more than 200,000 people around the world felt the same way that I did. And last December, the selection committee narrowed it down to 1,058 candidates. Later, the number shrunk to 705, and to my continuing amazement, I am still one of them. Now, how did it feel when I got the news? I get that question a lot. Kind of like winning the lottery and strapping yourself into the behemoth roller coaster at Canada's Wonderland all at the same time. Exciting, but terrifying, as I'm sure you can imagine. Now, in the beginning, I was in a state of disbelief. In fact, I pinch myself on a regular basis to make sure that I'm awake and not in some episode of The Twilight Zone. The question is, does me wanting to go to Mars make me a crazy weirdo, or am I actually more like you than you imagine? Here is what I mean. Hundreds of years ago, many of your ancestors faced the same dilemma. Should they leave their life, their friends, their family, everything that they knew, for a one-way ticket across the Atlantic to colonize the New World? Let's face it, it wasn't for everyone. And it certainly wasn't for the faint of heart, but some of them did it. So what set them apart from everyone else? That's easy. Their pioneering spirit. Well, I'm heading to a new world too. It just happens to be a longer trip. It's 55 million miles from Earth to Mars. It is no 3-hour tour like Gilligan's Island. It's a 7-month ride. So why do I want to hop on this ride? That's a valid question, and certainly one that my 94-year-old mother wanted me to answer. More on that later. In the meantime, here's what you need to know about me. I am a child of the 60s. Those of you too young to remember the 60s can Google it later tonight. In the 60s, as Mr. Znaimer can attest, watching television wasn't just an activity the way it seems to be now. It was an event. It was something special. And when I was a little girl, my favorite TV show was Lassie. My mom says I would cry at the end of the show when the sorrowful theme music came on. It was so sad, and I loved Lassie so much. Fast forward to a couple of years later, I was older and wiser, 5. I had a new favorite show. It was called Lost in Space. Meet the Robinson family. Their job was to colonize new worlds and to save humanity here on Earth, but there was a problem. Unfortunately, there was a stowaway on board, Dr. Zachary Smith. He was a spy for a foreign government, and his job was to sabotage the mission and destroy the ship and crew. Now, I don't know what it was about that show, but I just adored it. It was campy, and I didn't care. Who could forget the classic line, "Danger, Will Robinson"? And I have to wonder all these years later if that campy TV show is at least partly responsible for my quest to fly into space. I can only surmise that the answer must be yes, because here I am 40 years later, a journalist and a teacher with a serious shot at suiting up to go to Mars. Now, what appealed to me about the Mars One mission so much was the notion that anyone could apply. You didn't have to be Chris Hadfield. You didn't have to be an astrophysicist. You didn't have to be an aerospace engineer. It was space travel for you and me. In other words, it was amazing. In my view, the greatest story of the 21st century, the greatest assignment that a journalist could ever ask for. And I want to be the person who documents it for the rest of humanity left behind here on Earth. I'd also love to be the resident teacher on Mars, teaching people about space from space in exactly the same way that Chris Hadfield did it on board the International Space Station. It will be the greatest televised science experiment ever. Now, of course, I feel terrible about leaving my friends and family, not being able to come home. I'll miss sunrises, sunsets, the staggering beauty of nature that surrounds us every day. But I'm not alone in thinking this. I truly feel that if we as a species are to advance, we have to embrace new worlds. We have to have a pioneering spirit. We have to push the boundaries of what's possible. Now, one of the questions I hear a lot is, what will the civilization we establish on Mars look like? Mars One hired a graphic artist based in Calgary, Brian Versteeg, to translate this dream into reality, and this is what he came up with. The spacesuit we'll be wearing, the spaceships that will create the community once they've all landed on the surface of the planet. And looking at his work over the last 6 months has really made me think long and hard about what it will be like to wear the spacesuit, what it will be like to actually travel inside those ships. So as time has gone on, the whole thing has become more and more real to me. After I got word in December telling me that I'd made the cut, the fun part was about to begin, telling everybody. Now, I love to write, and luckily for me, the Hamilton Spectator graciously allowed me to tell my story in my own words. But before the article appeared in January, I had to tell my mother, my 94-year-old mother, Verna, who listens to Zoomer Radio, by the way. Dale Goldhawk is her favorite. Now, here's what you need to know about me and my mom. Throughout the course of my life, I've had to tell my mom about any number of what I thought were wonderful things that I wanted to do, all of which she declared to be crazy. After 9/11, I missed out on an opportunity to volunteer down in New York City with the Red Cross, so I decided instead to volunteer in Calcutta with Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity. According to my mom, crazy. I taught in China for a while. Crazy. I volunteered after the earthquake in Haiti. Crazy. Now, to be fair, my mom comes from a very different generation. She grew up during the Depression. People didn't go looking for adventure back then. They had enough adventure to deal with just feeding their family. So I get it. But you can imagine the trepidation with which I approached telling my mother this news. This is my mom on her 90th birthday. This is my mom the day I told her I was going to Mars. My mom gets upset if the gas bill is late by a couple of days. Imagine her reaction to this. At first, I was afraid, very afraid, but I wound up reading her the article that I wrote before it was printed in the paper, explaining in great detail why I wanted to do what I was doing. And the more we talked about it, the more she began to come around. Is she happy that I want to go to Mars? No. She's talking to me again, though, which is definitely a good thing. Now, one of your memories of space is pretty much guaranteed to be the moon landing of 1969. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Thanks, of course, to the great Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins. The Mars One mission owes a great debt of gratitude to these men. Had it not been for NASA and Apollo 11 taking man to the moon for the first time, we might not be sitting here talking about taking man to Mars for the first time. Now, I remember Apollo 11 too. I was 7 years old. My next brush with space didn't happen till I was 25, working at a radio station in Montreal, covering a story one day at a downtown hotel, and while I was there, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. A very big day in the life of a radio newsroom. It was a privilege to tell that story and to pay honor to those who sacrificed their lives in the name of space exploration. I had to wait 30 years before my next brush with space. It came last month when I got to meet the brilliant Chris Hadfield, commander of the International Space Station. I asked for his advice, and here's what he said. Be relentless in your questioning about the hardware. The astronaut selection is the least of their worries. Question the hardware. And it was practical, just what I needed to hear. I owe Chris Hadfield a debt of gratitude. He was telling me to make sure there's some substance to all of this, that it's not just a wild public relations stunt. It's also a serious endeavor. And anyone who doesn't ask the important questions isn't being serious enough about it. You can be sure that when the time comes and Mars One releases the details of all the technicalities, I'll be certainly ready to ask those questions. Now, I'm out of time, so I'm going to skip way ahead. To play teacher here very quickly, Moses, if you'll allow me another minute. I started this talk by asking you a big question, and I'm going to end it by asking you a few more big questions. Here's where the teacher in me comes out. What is your next big mission in life? What brave new world do you want to explore? Maybe it's as simple as wanting to dream a new dream for your life and make it a reality. Whatever it is, the message I want to leave you with today is to believe. Let go of that voice inside your head that says that could never happen, because I'm here to tell you right now that it can and it is. Look how far space exploration has come in such a relatively short period of time. Man is going to the red planet. So here's the bottom line. If you want to boldly go where no man has gone before, guess what? You need to get started. Dream the dream. Ignore the haters, and there are plenty of those. And if you hear a voice saying, "Danger, Will Robinson," that's okay. Do it anyway. What the world needs more of is pioneers. Who knows what we can achieve when we're willing to put ourselves out there and try? A year ago, I put myself out there, and look what happened. Sandra Bullock in Gravity? That could be me. It could be you. So if you're talking to my mom anytime soon, tell her it's all going to be okay. Heck, if you want to make her feel good, tell her that you think I'm crazy too. But tell her that crazy is the most beautiful thing in this universe that you can possibly be. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I love it. That was so quiet and understated. It's enthusiasm.
Your asthma.